Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our post lunch session. Our next speaker is Dr. Mamata Dolui. Dr. Dolui is an assistant professor of National Institute of Technology, Durgapur. She received her BTech in Computer Science and Engineering from University of Calcutta and ME and PhD degree from Indian Institute of Engineering, Science and Technology, Shibpur. She is an active researcher in the domain of cellular automata. Her research area also includes intelligent biomedical devices, multiprocessor and multi-core architecture, parallel and distributed system, hardware security, and VLSI design and test. She has already contributed more than 35 technical papers in renowned journals and conferences. Today, she will deliver a talk on cellular automata and computer architecture. Over to you, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you, Shukriti, for your introduction. First of all, good afternoon to all of you. Hope all of you are safe, healthy, and happy in this difficult time. Sir, should I start?
Yep, sure.
Okay, yeah. I'm sharing my screen.
Yes.
Is it visible?
Yes, it's coming.
Yeah. Okay, sure. Today I'll be discussing on computer architecture and cellular automata. Basically, I will focus on cellular automata as solution for exascale architecture. What exascale architecture means, these are basically computer systems capable of performing one exaflop floating point operations, like actually 10 to the power 18 floating point operations per cycle per second. These are basically the target design of 2020s and so forth. Till date, no such single machine could have reached these performance limits. These are basically relates to the supercomputer systems. Single machine couldn't have reached to this limit, but some distributed systems are already being performing in this, meeting this criteria, like they are performing in one exaflop operations per second. What we had in 1990s, we had billions of transistors per chip, but in 2020s, the target is billions of core per chip. Actually, thing is that the effort to enhance the computing speed with a traditional single core processor, it has reached to its extreme limit. So the computing paradigm has shifted toward the multi-core architecture where multiple number of cores are being integrated into a single chip called the chip multiprocessors. In chip multiprocessors or CMP system, the cores are operating in a cooperative environment. They're sharing the resources like the shared memories and all those. So accordingly, there are a lot of such issues are coming for ensuring the data consistency of such systems. So we focus on cache coherence issues in chip multiprocessor. Though it is a very well-known problem, cache coherence problem, I will introduce and I'll discuss about some basics of this and eventually move toward the cellular automata-based solutions for verification of cache coherence problems. Like first, to introduce the cache coherence problem, let us consider a multiprocessor system where there are multiple number of processors in the system. If one processor updates a data item without informing the other processor, like same data is being shared by the multiple cores, say as shown over here in the picture. So for data item X is being shared by both the processors P1 and P2, and P2 is modifying the data item X into its cache. It has updated it to 13 without informing P1. So it results into data inconsistency. Now if P1 uses this data, it will end up with a wrong computation. We can see with this detailed example over here. Same system we are considering, system with two processors P1 and P2, and each of them are having their caches as C1 for P1 and C2 is the cache for private cache for P2, and they are sharing the same common main memory, say. Initially, none of the caches are having the data item X. So P1 first issues a read request for the item X. It will encounter a cache miss and it will perform a read from the shared memory. So it is having now X equals to 10. P2 also reads data item X. It will also encounter a read miss and it will read from the shared memory. Now operation 3, you consider P2 performs a write. It will encounter heat and it performs the write. It updates X equals to 13 in its cache. Now if we consider the fourth operation, this P1 reads, it will encounter a heat, but it will get X equals to 10, which is a stale value. If it uses this in its computation, it will end up with a wrong result. At this moment, after this operation 1 and 2, the state of the caches are having same value for the data item X. So these caches are called coherent, whereas after this operation 4, with this operation 4, the state of the caches, just after the operation 3, the state of the caches are not coherent. P1's cache is having X equals to 10, whereas P2's cache is having X equals to 13. Also, the main memory is having the older value, leading to an inconsistent value. So this is basically the problem. Now, what could be its solution? Yeah, so when P1 its cache or P2's cache, it can generate invalidate signal to mark all the copies in the system as invalidated. See here, P2 can send invalidation to all other processors' caches to make their copies marked as invalidated. Now, when this P1's Snoopy hardware sees the invalidation request for the data item that it is holding, it will mark it as invalid. So, though it is present in the cache, but it is marked as invalid, so it won't be used. Yeah, so in P1's cache, the block X is marked as invalid, so it can be used. So what happens? Once it is marked as invalid and P1 tries to read, it will encounter a cache miss and accordingly it will generate generate read request from the lower level memory. Now, when this P1 generates this read request, this request is broadcasted through the shared bus and this could be seen by the processor P2. P2 then suspends this read request and it updates the data value into the shared memory. It suspends the read request and performs the write to the shared memory for updating with the correct value. Then P1 will regenerate the read request and it will get the correct value from the shared memory. Yeah. So if we assume here, we have assumed the write back strategy, that is cache to main memory as a write back policy. If we have write through policy, means when a processor performs a write to its cache, it is also writing to the lower level memory, the shared memory. This type of inconsistency writes to X equals to in the shared memory. Now, what is the scenario here? Also, these cases of incoherency might occur. You see, when this P1 say it's performing as X equals to 20, but see, validated or updated with the same value, it won't end up with a wrong computation as it is using the stale value. So there are two possibilities. We can use either a invalidation based scheme or a update based scheme. In the update based schemes, what happens when processor performs writes, it will also update all other cache copies. Or in the invalidation based scheme, When processor performs write, it invalidates the all other processor copies. Yeah, so Snoop-based protocols, these are coming in these two flavors, this write update, or also called write broadcast, and the write invalidate. But what are the Snoop-based systems are easy to implement, but they are having scalability issues. Snoop-based systems are not scaled well beyond 32 processors. What happens to a write update-based protocols? Just see with an example. Suppose we are having a write back cache and the main memory location X is initially having 0. So P1 reads X from the main, it performs a read from the main memory and its cache is having X. So P1's cache is having X equals to 0 initially. Next, P2 also performs read. It will also read from the shared memory and it will get X equals to 0 in its cache. Now, if P1 writes 1 to X, and we are assuming a write broadcast, so it will broadcast the value, it will update all the values. Next, P2 when reads X, it will have a cache hit and it will get the updated value. Now, what happened in contrast to an invalidation-based system, what happens? Say P1, same example, we are considering P1 reads X, it will have a cache miss and it will read X equals to 0 from the main memory. Now its cache is having X equals to 0. P2 also performs read on the value X. So it will also having X equals to 0 into its cache. Now when P1 performs write 1 to X, it will send invalidation. Now P2's cache, though it is having X equals to 0, but it is marked as invalid. So it can't be used. Next, P2 reads X. So it will have a read miss for this, and then accordingly, P1 will perform write to the main memory and it can get the value as X equals to 1 from the main memory. Now, as I have mentioned, Snoop-based systems are having some limitations. They are very easy to implement, but they don't scale for large-scale systems. So we need to have directory-based systems. What directory-based systems are there? For maintaining coherency in a directory-based system, that is sent to the only caches which are currently sharing the block. In contrast, in Snoop-based system, what is being done? Invalidation is broadcasted through the shared channel. So all the other processors which are having a copy of the block, they can accordingly mark their copies as invalidated. But in contrast to stop the unnecessary broadcasting, in directory-based system, we need to keep track of all the caches which are sharing a particular block. So this sharing status need to be recorded appropriately. Here we are assuming a system with the two processors P1, P2. Here is the shared memory. This directory structure that we are assuming, it's a full map directory for a n number of processors in general. The directory entry will be a n+1 bit vector, where this D bit, here we are having these two processor system. So we are having 3-bit sharing vector. Here, this D bit is representing the DATI bit. If D is set, means the corresponding entry is DATI, and if D is 0, the copy is clean. And what this P1, P2 stands for, these are denoting the sharing status. Whether P1 is sharing the block B, then the corresponding entry would be marked as 1. So here, at this configuration, it designates that a memory has a copy, and this is a clean copy. No other processors, this P1 and P2, none of them are sharing the block B. Now see here the entry for block is B is marked as 0, and P is 1. P1 is 1 and P2 is 0, designating that P1 is having a copy of this block, and this is a clean copy. Figure C shows that this D bit is set. D bit is 1, that means it is having a DATI copy. Now you see here P1 is 0 and the corresponding bit for P2 is set to 1, that means only P2 is having a copy of this block and it is a dirty copy. When a copy would be a dirty copy? When it is modified. And the last figure, figure D, also shows a clean copy. This only memory is having the copy. Actually, P2, suppose it has been P2, this block A in P2 has been selected for eviction. In that case, P2 will perform write back to the lower level memory and this block would be evicted. So in that case, memory would be having a clean copy, but none of this P1, P2 is sharing this block. Now this directory structure, we can see it stores the information who is caching, who is having a cached copy of the block. And in what do they have the block? As we have already come across, there are different states. There are different implementation of the directory structure as I have directory, and you know this in the full of directory implementation, for each and every block, we need to store n+1 number of bits. So it's the storage overhead is quite higher. So accordingly, there are alternative schemes, limited directory and chain directory also. Limited directory, we potentially limit the number of sharers for a block. And in chain directory, where is stored in the form of a linked list, the next sharers. So only those are the sharers. We would have a linked list kind of structure to have record of the potential sharers only. We don't have to store all the processor states like with sharing or not. Accordingly, this is some optimized storage optimized representation. What happens in directory-based solution, suppose processor PI is asking for a block. It's having a read request for block B. So it consults the directory and it finds some potential owner of the block. It checks, suppose it requests to processor PJ, and in PJ's, this is actually a not a centralized directory, it's a distributed directory concept to reduce the storage overhead. The directory is distributed and is stored into different processors location. Yeah, so when PI is requesting for block B, it's sending the request to processor PJ. Processor PJ will check into its directory entry for the corresponding status. If it is having a clean copy of the block, it will return the block to the processor PI, and also PI's entry would be added to the directory entry. Now, if PJ is not having the clean copy, it might check that there exists a dirty copy with the processor PK. Then it will redirect the request to processor PK, wherever PK will perform write back and also share the return the block to the requesting processor and accordingly add PI as one of the sharers of this block. Now, for ensuring cache coherence, we have several MSI. The state MSI protocol is the simplest one, where M stands for modified, A stands for shared, and I stands for invalid. Here in the state transition diagram, it has been shown for two processor PI and PJ. The states are associated with processor PJ. Whenever there is a processor, P1 and PJ is some other processor. Suppose processor P1 is having a write miss. It wants to write, so it will signal all other processor PJs with the invalidation request, and it will enter into the modified state. On successive read-write hit, it will continue to be into this state, modified state. Now, when processor P1 is in modified state, if some other processor PJ is having a read miss, then processor P1 will perform a write back and it will change its state to shared state. So whenever there are more than one copy in the system, so the copy will be in shared state. Whenever the processor P1 is in shared state and it is having successive read hit, it will continue to be into the same state. Now processor P1, if it is having a read miss also, it will enter into this shared state. Whenever processor P1 is in shared state and some other processor PJ is having a write miss, it will receive the invalidation, and on receiving this invalidation, it will change its state to invalid. Similarly, when processor P1 is in modified state and some other processor PJ is performing write, so it will send invalidation, and accordingly processor P1 will change its state to invalid state. This is the state transition diagram for the MSI protocol. Here, some limitations of this protocol we can identify, like whenever processor P1 is in shared state and there are no other sharer of this block, only P1 is having a clean copy of this block. Now processor P1 wants to perform write to this block. There are no other sharer, so no need to send invalidation, but as per the property of the state, whenever there would be a write operation, it will send an invalidation, because it don't know whether this is an exclusive copy or not. So it will send invalidation. This invalidation is unnecessary. So there is a need for a designated exclusive state, and the resulting protocol is a messy protocol, where we have an explicit exclusive state. For the very first read operation of a block, it will enter into exclusive state. It designates that there is only one copy of this block existing in the system. So whenever it wants to perform write, it don't have to send invalidation. It can silently change its state from exclusive to modified. This is the implication of this exclusive state. There are other protocols also, like sometimes there is a need for cache to cache transfer. Suppose some of the processors are caching a copy of a block and some other processor is asking for that block. If the requesting processor can easily get that block from some other already existing sharers, the cache to cache transfer, it will be quite faster instead of accessing the block from the lower level memory. Now, if we allow cache to cache transfer, so suppose there are more than one sharer of the block existing in the system, and currently one of the other processor is requesting the same block. So who would send it to the requesting processor? All the processors are in the same state. All of them are in shared state. Shared processor is in shared state who can forward the copy to the requesting processor instead of multiple broadcasting. So there is a need for a designated sharer, which is called the owned state. The resulting protocol is MOSI, M-O-S-I, also the well-known protocol MOESI, MOSI protocol, which is so this is the implication of O state. Now, I will just describe a brief of this basic system model of a chip multiprocessor system. Here, we're having a number of processors, P1, P2, up to Pn. Each of these processors is having its own private cache. There is C1, C2, and Cn, all this. All these processors are sharing a common L2 cache called the shared L2 cache. The state of a block can be stored in the caches like this data item, value of the data item along with its state, whether it is in modified or shared or in invalid state. This state of the blocks are also stored accordingly. Now, there is an important hardware component, the CC. This is the cache coherence controller, which manages all the activity related to cache coherence. In the heart of the CC, there is a finite state machine called the protocol processor, which computes the next state of the block based on some input like the current state, the other inputs like whether it is a bus read or a processor read, whether the current operation is a read write. Based on such inputs, it computes the next state of the block, which is being updated to the state of the block. Now, if there is some fault within the CC, like there is some hardware fault in the CC which might result into wrong computation of the state. Like, say, suppose the current state is shared and the next state would be modified, but it is wrongly computed as shared. So ideally, it should be modified, but it has been wrongly computed as shared. In this case, expected invalidation broadcast would occur, but it will not occur as the resulting state is shared. So the values are not correctly been designated as invalidated. So other processor may end up with wrong result. So this correct computation and also the communication of the state to the appropriate location, this is very important for maintaining reliability and dependability of the system. Hence, we have a need for a coherence verification logic which can verify whether the collection of states are coherent or not. So existing solutions are there. The solution when proposed by Wei Wang and their team is this solution is a quite computation intensive steps are involved in this solution, and also some complex data structures are involved. Here, what they have done, they compute, apart from the additional, conventional computation logic, they are employing an additional hardware which takes all the inputs, and based on the inputs, it computes the state of the cache line, and also it matches with the system generated state, and accordingly it stores into a checker table entry. So such type of solution, it involves huge storage requirement also. Here we are considering cellular automata based solution for verifying whether the collection of states of the system, of the CMP system, is coherent or not. Cellular automata basics, as already has been discussed by several speakers. I'm not going into these details. Here only we are employing a one-dimensional CA, two-state, three-neighborhood CA we have considered. Yeah. So we are considering irreversible CA. And two special classes of irreversible CA we are using, basically the SCCA, single length cycle, single attractor CA, and single length cycle, two attractor CA. The rules that we are mostly using, these are some of the SCCA rules has been shown over here, like rule 15, 240, 192. These are some of the rules that we are using in our design. Active passive RMTs, these are very relevant to this single length cycle attractor, which are also called point state attractor. Passive RMTs are RMTs, those whose next state are same. Like if we have the RMT x0y and its next state is 0, or the RMT x1y, where x and y could be anything 0 and 1. If its next state is 1, we will call it as passive RMT. If these are different, we would call it as active RMTs. Yeah, that I was telling you, this we are employing such special type of irreversible CA, like SCCA, where we have only in the state transition diagrams of SCCA, we can see there's only single graph and with a single point state attractor. Whereas in case of TSCA, we are having two subgraphs, each of them with a single length cycle attractor. Each of them are having one point state attractor. We know there are 41 such SSCA rules which shows this kind of behavior, and also we have identified 15 such TSCA rules which are having this kind of behavior. Now, I will just introduce the concept how we have used this kind of cellular automata for various having their caches C1, C2, C3, C4, C. Suppose the block B is in shared state in all the 4 caches. This is a valid combination of state. All the processor can share the block in shared state. We have encoded this state with some binary encoding, like we have used in the design, we have used code 11 for modified state, 10 for shared state, and 00 for invalid state, whereas 01 we are accessing the state information from the caches, and based on these we are configuring a CA. Based on the state, we are dynamically configuring the CSL rules. Here the state is 10, we are configuring accordingly. The corresponding CSL is configured with rule 192. Since all the 4 caches are having the block in shared state, a CA would be a uniform CA configured with rule 192. Now, if we run this CA from all one's initial seed, we need to run the CA for depth of CA time steps. So it will reach to the attractor. Here the attractor is the 0 attractor. And in the case of a fault, you see here C2 is the block in M2 M state, whereas all other caches is not permissible. If one cache is holding the block in modified states, others should be in invalid state. This should be the correct combination. But wrongly, the invalidation might not be broadcasted, so it is still in shared state. Accordingly, you see the state information we have encoded like this, and the CA is configured as 192, 207, 192, 192. We have chosen the rule 207 for this modified state. Now, if we run the CA from the same initial seed, all one initial seed, it will reach to a different final state. Here, it is highlighted portion. If we run the CA for this same number of states, here the depth of the CA is 1, 2, 3, 4. Here also we need to run the CA for the same number of steps, but it will remain into this attractor 7. Now, in the non-faulty case and in the faulty case, the attractor differs. Essentially, we may need to check only a single bit of the attractor. We are considering the LSB of the attractor. So just by checking a single bit of the final state, we can conclude whether the collection of system states are valid or not. So for finding the rule combinations, we have used this cellular automata theory, wherein we have encountered this for an in-cell CA configured with rule 215 and 240 in any sequence, it forms SSCA. Actually, in the design, as I have shown you, for better understanding, I have shown you a simpler cases. But for the actual, we need to consider all possible RO. If hybridized by rule RH generates new attractors, if set of active RMTs of RO is not subset of active RMTs of RH. While we are selecting the rules like 15 and 240, this combination, we can check this theorem. This is followed. The active RMTs of rule 15 is 0, 1, 6, 7, whereas the active RMTs of rule 240 is 2, 3, 4, 5. So instead of an exhaustive search into the rule space, we have consulted this theorem to reduce the search space. that helps in finding out the appropriate rule combinations. Also, that the rule combination I have shown in the example 192 and 207, it is a very good combination which helps us to find out some more possible cases to segregate faulty and non-faulty cases. We have used this in the design of CA-based verification. Now I would this verification unit would be a n plus 1 bit vector, 40 bit, and all these PIs, whoever is a sharer, if PI is a sharer of the block, the corresponding bit would be 1 or else it would be 0. Now this designates whether a processor is a sharer or not. Now also along with this is the sharing bit vector, and also accordingly some sharing status, like in which state the processor is sharing the block, whether it is in modified or shared in invalid, which is the sharing status. This is also being stored along with the data block. Now suppose whether due to some internal fault in the internal logic of CC, the coherence controller, we might have some wrong entries either in the sharing bit vector or in the sharing status. Whether this sharing status or the sharing vector both are compatible or not, we have mapped the coherence verification for a directory-based system to this problem, like we are checking the sharing status vector along with the sharing bit vector. See here, we have shown in the example for a 4 processor system. Here, one is the states, two is vectors. Only the data bit has not been shown. We are only considering these presence bits. These presence bits are shown accordingly. To check whether these two are compatible or not. This MSB 0 is ORed with this presence bit 0. This MSB 1 is ORed with this 1. This way, we have done XORing operation for this pair of sharing status vector and the sharing bit vector to form the compatibility status. Whenever there is a mismatch, we would be having the corresponding bit in the compatibility status as 1. So uniform CA having two single length cycle attractor, the one that corresponds to the non-faulty cases and the other corresponds to the faulty cases. See here, we have this CA, uniform CA configured with rule 254. It's having this kind of behavior. Here, it's having a all 0 attractor and it's having a all 1 attractor. All these two are point state attractor. Now, this while we are computing the compatibility status by XORing the MSB of status vector and the presence bit to form the compatibility status, and this compatibility status is now being used as the initial seed for the CA. CA rule we have fixed, unlike the previous design. Here we have fixed the CA rule and we are taking out the compatibility status as input to the seed to the CA. Now the CA will be run for depth of time steps, and the LSB of the attractor will designate whether there is a fault in the cache states not. So what I was discussing in the non-faulty cases, the sharing status and sharing bit vector would be compatible. If we take a MSB of sharing status and sharing bit vector, if we sort them and form the compatibility status, it would be a all zero vector. And these all zero vector would be fed as initial seed to the CA configured with uniform CA configured with rule 254. It will reach to the final state all zero. In the faulty case, we would be having a mismatch of the sharing status along with the sharing bit vector, and accordingly, we would be having a non-zero compatibility status as shown in the figure 0, 1, 0, 0. Now, if we run the same CA with this as the initial seed, we would be reaching to a different final state. So, just by checking the LSB of the final state, we can easily conclude whether the collection of system states are coherent or not. Now, in this design that I was discussing here, we need to run the CA for depth of time steps. For each and every transaction, we need to run the CA for depth of CA time steps. Sometimes we may need to maintain a logbook for a set of transactions, whether all the transactions have passed through a safe states. So for that, we have a more efficient design. Like here, we have considered in the non-faulty case, actually, the CA would be configured as a uniform CA, and in the case of a fault, the CA would be a hybrid CA, hybridized with rule 255. We have used this theorem to find out this, choose this rule combination as suitable for our design, like uniform TSCA with rule 254 converts into SSCA if hybridized with rule 255 at single or multiple positions. We see uniform CA with rule 254 is a TSCA. Now, if we hybridize this CA with rule 255 at any position as a single or multiple hybridization, the resulting CA would be a SSCA having all one attractor. Now, what is the principle behind this, that we have chosen this rule combination? Whenever there is one or more transactions are faulty, the resulting CA would be a hybrid CA, and we need to preserve the fault signature even if the later transactions are non-faulty. Once there's a faulty transaction, the fault signature will remain, and at the end of all the transactions, we could have detect whether some of the transactions were faulty or not. I'm explaining this with the help of an example. Let us consider a set of 5 transactions. For each of these transactions, we are forming the compatibility status. We are assuming here that all the transactions are non-faulty except transaction 2, which is designated by this 1 in its compatibility status. Now, for in this case, we won't run the CA depth of CA time steps for each and every transaction. Here, rather we will run the CA 1 time step for all the transactions, and for the last transaction, we would run the CA for depth of CA time steps to reach to the final attractor. Now you see the design over here for transaction 0. It's being a for non-faulty transaction, the compatibility status would be a all 0 status, and the corresponding CA would be configured with rule 254. Here we are using this compatibility status as the CA seed. Sorry, CA seed, we are using all 0 initial seed for the CA, and this compatibility status is being used to configure the CSL rules. Now this CA with uniform CA that is configured for transaction 0 would be run with this all 0 initial seed for only one time step. So it's producing the next state as all 0, and these next state for this transaction will also be used as the seed for the CA that is configured for the next transaction. Say for transaction 1, it is also a non-faulty transaction. So the resulting CA is a uniform CA, and this CA would use this next state as produced by the previous one as its initial seed, and it will be run for one time step. It will also produce a all 0 next state. Now transaction 2 being a faulty transaction, it will be a hybrid CA, hybridized with rule 255 at the position of the fault. Now this CA, when run with this initial seed, all 0 initial seed for one step, it producing the next state as 0, 1, 0, 0. Next, transaction 3 is also a non-faulty transaction. So the CA would be a uniform CA with rule 254. Now this CA with rule 254, once it is run for this initial seed 0, 1, 0, 0, it produces the next state as 1, 1, 1, 0. This way, for the last transaction 4, we will be using this 1, 1, 1, 0 as the initial seed for this CA, and it's being a non-faulty transaction. The resulting CA is a uniform CA with rule 254. Now at this state, we will run the CA for depth of CA time steps to reach to the final attractor. And LSB of attractor being 1, it designates the presence of fault. That is, it designates one or more transactions are faulty. Here we are only detecting whether there is any transaction which is faulty or not. But which one is faulty, we are not going to the diagnosis part. So this design basically ensure for n number of caches and k number of transactions. This basically ensures k plus n minus 1 time step execution for this system. Now, as I have explained here, we can devise with cellular automata, we can devise efficient solutions for quick determination of data consistencies in caches. We have shown for the Snoop-based system as well as directory-based systems. We can target solution for CMPs with thousands of processor cores. The solution as addressed over here, it avoids rigorous computational and communication overhead as compared to the existing solutions. The inherent robustness and scalability of the CA can be exploited to design robust and scalable design for CMPs with billions of cores. Yeah, now, if anyone have any question, please.
Thank you for the nice talk. Does anyone have any question?
Okay, I have a question, Mamata.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So you were talking about TPCA and TPCA.
TSCA.
Sorry, TSCA.
Right. Yeah.
And for that, you have used, say, rule 255 and etc. And for your purpose, you have shown that TACA and SSCA, they are dual role. They can play some important role. So my question is, SSCA is okay apart from TACA. So there are maybe other CAs like 3 attractor, 4 attractor, others one. And if you do hybridization with some different, you may get different result. So for your purpose, do this kind of CA have any role that apart from TPCA, if you have say 3 or 4 attractor, okay, then sorry, TACA, apart from TACA, if you have a CA with 4 or 5 attractors after hybridization, will that kind of CA play any role in your case?
Yes, sir. In this case, actually, we are. What is the requirement? We need to classify whether the system is faulty or not. As if a 2-class classifier, we are requiring this rule 254, as we are designating it as a TACA. This is having a beautiful nature. It's having a all 0 attractor and all other non-zero states are leading to the all one attractor.
Right.
Now, what is the beauty of this design that I have explained? See, in the case, whenever there is one faulty transaction from a group of transaction, in case of fault, it actually shifts the attractor, it shifts the attractor basin. Right? So, with the hybridization, this is shifted to the non-zero basins, from the zero basin to the non-zero basin, to which helps in preserving the fault signature. So if we need to have several, as you are telling, there could be 3 or 4 point state attractor Cs, yeah, that's fine. But here only our objective is to classify whether there's a fault or not, faulty and non-faulty classification. So it is, I think it is suffice to have this class with 2 point state attractor. This suited our purpose perfectly. That's why we didn't check for other Cs, and in some cases, wherever we may need to have multiple different classifications, we can also use the class of CA like MACA, multiple single length cycle attractor CA, or those kind of things.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, any other questions?
Yeah, I have one question.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, you were telling about whether a fault is there or not. That only you are detecting. You are not detecting where the fault has been, right?
Yes, I'm not going to the diagnosis part. It's a detection. So fault is there's a fault or not?
But a diagnosis can be done like using MSCA kind of thing, where depending
Yes,
on the
yes. Yeah.
Okay. So in that case, maybe if depending on the fault position of fault, the basin is shifted to some particular
Right.
area, then that can be used for diagnosis kind of thing.
Yes. That kind of thing can be used. Multiple point state attractor CA, those kind of thing can be useful in case of diagnosis.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions from anyone?
Maybe no.
Okay, if no, then thank you once again for the great talk. And we are now closing our today's session. We shall be back tomorrow at the same time, that is at 10:30 a.m. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mamata.
Yeah, okay.
A lot of travel you have taken.
Yes, sir. This is now part of our life.
Yeah, right.
Actually, from yesterday, there are a lot of power problem is going on in our NIT campus. We have also had another meeting yesterday night. We couldn't conduct it due to the power problem. Some power problem with
Okay.
yeah, it's going on. Okay.
So these things are not in our hand. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.